Hello, everybody. I'm Dale Pinkert with TradeGATEHub.com, powered by TradeView Markets. And I have the pleasure and you have the opportunity to learn today from author Jeff Booth. Jeff, great to meet you.
Yeah, really good meeting you too, Dale.
Really interesting topic, the price of tomorrow. And a lot of people, that's their main fear right now is the price of tomorrow. How about the price of today when you go anywhere to buy anything? I think that's really the major issue that the Fed is trying to control, but we know about policy errors in the Fed over their history, right, buddy?
You betcha.
All right, so you say deflation is good, all right, and I just before we get to your book and Bitcoin and what you go around talking to people about, which I think is great that you're educating people in crypto. I need education. I'm old school, and I'm still trading legacy markets. So, Jeff, tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to becoming an author and writing this book.
Just that, hey. So the easiest way, I'm a technology entrepreneur and built a bunch of technology companies, one of which its peak was worth $500 million. And kind of from that adventure of essentially trying to solve problems with technology, and the only companies that work when you solve those problems for people and gave them more value. In other words, prices came down by what you were doing.
Right.
And I couldn't understand why technology, which was all around us, moving into every single thing at a base layer, everything, and moving faster and faster and faster, moving exponentially with artificial intelligence and the likes of robotics and a whole bunch of different technologies converging. I couldn't understand why in my business I was seeing prices falling for that same technology, but in the broader market, prices weren't falling. And so for about 10 years, I was talking about this, and it was just, I became really, really curious, and then ended up having to write the book, because what I realized is we had two systems crashing into each other. One led by essentially human nature and technology, us wanting to get more for less, and entrepreneurs solving that for us, and we were using that, and that would make prices fall at an extraordinary rate. And actually that prices falling was saving our time. It was giving us back our time, but it was crashing into a system that had to work the other way, a credit-based system that must essentially obfuscate that technology gain and transfer it to a small number of people who'd made decisions over us through inflation. And so you essentially had to remove the power of the free market and concentrate all power in a few hands to be able to stop the gains from technology broadly delivering its power to people. And so that was why I wrote the book. And I wrote the book specifically for my kids, because I realized they wouldn't live in the world that I grew up in if this trend would continue, and it was going to continue.
And we really, in a way, although we've gone through periods of inflation and recession, accompanied at times by deflation, like the housing bubble, for example, that's not good inflation. That's inflation brought about through a credit event. So what you're saying is a fractional banking system is colliding with decentralized monetary system supported by blockchain. So tell us when you first got involved and started looking at blockchain, and you're a proponent of Bitcoin. How long ago did that happen, and how were you able to, if you're one of those hodlers, be able to ride out cyclical bear markets that occurred in price in Bitcoin, that the madness of crowds get excited after it's rallied tenfold, and despair when we have 70% corrections.
Yeah, so any new network, Amazon went from in 2001 went from $120 to $5.
Right.
and very few people held Amazon all the way up to where it is today, $2,500, $3,200 on some days. And if you looked at the splits in that time too, what you would what that would happen. By the way, the same thing happened in Google. Same thing happened in every single technology company that works with a network effect. And a network effect adds more value to the network with each additional user. And 70% of all value of technology stocks is actually from a network effect. And so people are looking, and by the way, it's only Bitcoin, it's not the other blockchains or anything else, and I'll explain the reason. But in Bitcoin, in a blockchain specifically, you can solve for two of three things on a triangle: decentralization, security, or scalability. If you put those three on a triangle, you can only solve for two. And Bitcoin solved for decentralization and security. And essentially what that meant is they took, by doing that, no human can change the code. It's leaderless. It's a headless system, so you can't stop it. It's really secure, and it's designed to be decentralized, but it couldn't be scalable, at least on the primary layer. And that opened up an opportunity for a whole bunch of different blockchains. It's starting with Ethereum and then Solana and everything else, to be able to attack it by offering security and sacrificing decentralization, scalability, sacrificing decentralization or security. And so what you see in all of these other coins is they rise up really fast and then they crash, and then they rise up really fast and they crash, or and that is because the system is designed to be less secure for scalability. And just now, through Lightning and Taproot and a bunch of upgrades on layer 2, now Bitcoin on a second layer has scalability. So the primary layer is really secure and decentralized, and there's going to be a whole innovation stack on top of Bitcoin that solves the scaling issue. And so now you have the
Does that make it less secure?
No, because the first layer is super secure, and the second layer builds onto the first layer.
Okay,
so it's building on a really strong foundation, and you're going to have an incredible innovation on top of that. But what that is actually saying is, and mistake potentially you're making, some of your viewers are making, they're looking at Bitcoin as an investment instead of a transition from one system to another. And that transition, that network effect transition, is like investing. Investing in Bitcoin itself is like investing in TCP/IP. It's actually like owning a piece of the internet, and it's growing at the same rate as the internet, but it's 1997 in Bitcoin. Remember what happened after 1997 in the internet. And if you realize the growth rate is exactly the same on both networks, you can kind of predict what will happen in Bitcoin on top. So yes, there's a whole bunch of companies going to be built on top of Bitcoin. Yes, there's a whole bunch more coming, but it's really early, and owning Bitcoin itself is like owning a piece of the internet.
Okay, there's a difference between, say, owning it here, and actually, as I look at this chart, one of the technical things I do is I look for threes. It's 3 is a number of completion, and to me, it looks like there's another high coming in Bitcoin. Let me ask you this about the behavior and the price behavior. But first, what was the price you paid for your first Bitcoin?
I think around $4,000.
Okay, so that's not exactly an early adopter.
No,
right?
So I knew about it because my technology background. I knew about it very early. It was some of my employees were begging me, imploring me to look at it deeper, like it's pennies.
Some younger people.
And I was too busy in my business. I was what you said. My business. I'm investing in the other stocks. That's what I do. Everything else, and I was just too busy to. It was intriguing, but I didn't think it actually had what I'm talking about today. And it was only until I'd owned it before I wrote the book. But truthfully, even at the end of the book, I only put one paragraph on Bitcoin in the book. I was looking for any potential solve to the credit-based system that we had that could transition humanity without essentially war and reset.
Okay, so
And
we're going to have both. We have
and
one going on now, and the reset hasn't happened yet.
yeah, so that reset, it would not be like the reset in 1971, where you had a unipower in the U.S. and they could just dictate terms and go off the gold reserve, and make an essentially print oil when everybody else had to pay for oil. And to do that, they had to have a military that essentially shut people off of a network if you would trade in US dollars,
or freeze them on the SWIFT system, with the recent example with Russia.
Exactly, but that's been going on for a long time. Whether it's Venezuela, Iran, it's been going on for a long time. But it also creates an instability in the U.S. in that China uses that that advantage, or that trade advantage, to peg their dollar instead of buying bonds. China pegs the dollar and essentially hollows out, keeping their labor rate low, and hollows out the U.S. middle class by doing that, and builds a huge nation. That geopolitical fight today about all of this actually ends in world war if it keeps on going, because people believe in simple narratives. Yes. Instead of the entire money system is broken and there's no way out. So you ask yourself what the Fed would do if the Fed actually did what the free market says. They would stop printing money. But if they did that credit, that deflation that I talk about being a good thing, would be a credit reset event, but our entire world is built on top of that credit reset. So every single thing would fail. So they can't do that. So the only alternative they have is to keep on printing forever, yield curve control, everything else. And that means all prices rise, the rich get richer, poor get poorer. Because inflation is wage deflation. You're picking the pocket of some people and transferring it to others. It's an unnatural theft. And when you do that, essentially the monopoly board all over the world gets kicked over, and that's what you're seeing. You're seeing today, because the game's rigged.
Okay. So you think we're getting closer to the end game here, Jeff?
Yeah, we're getting closer to the end game, and it's happening. And it doesn't matter where. I often say, which snowflake causes the avalanche? Yes. Because people are looking at individual events, thinking they still live in the same world from the same financial system they grew up in, and they don't. And it doesn't, whether the yen keeps on running away because of yield curve control, or some other currency fails, and then the US will probably be the last currency to fail. But that destruction of value all over the world, accelerating, and you'll hear different politicians tell you different answers, essentially blaming other people for the problem. It's Russia's fault. Food prices are rising, and that's to turn a whole bunch of people against another state, and such, that you'll get. And again, there's nuance into. I'm not saying Russia's great in this or anything else, but this is all for control of a narrative around who gets to print money.
Okay, let me ask you this, with this lockdown in China, and you bring up China, who's really learned to take advantage of what's been going on to build a great nation, as you said, and these lockdowns that we have over COVID, it's not about COVID. Is it, Jeff? It's about population control. They've already been giving people less to eat. I believe they call it the clean plate. Type of thing. You clean your plate. And when I was younger, my mother Jewish mothers make their kids feel guilty and say, don't waste that food. There are people starving in China. So what's happening here? Do you think that China is going to make their move against Taiwan after watching how we responded to Russia's invasion of Ukraine?
So they'll wait right now, but you can imagine in game theory what ends up happening. So what would you do if you owned $1 trillion of US bonds, and the bonds had to roll over and somebody had to buy them, right? So a whole bunch of bonds are coming up and due, and those bonds have to be financed. And if you were China, would you, now that you know that essentially the US just seized all of Russia's foreign reserves in US dollars, what would China do right now? And what I suspect, and by the way, the same debt cycle is happening in China too. And so you've never had a country create as debt to G, or as much debt to GDP as fast as China has. So the miracle of China is mostly a miracle of a debt bubble.
Okay.
But what would you do? Would you try to get your money out of the US, and would you try to find a different store of value? Maybe those are rare earth mines. Maybe those are African Belt and Road. But you would effectively try to take as much money out of the market that you saw risk at, and you would put it into things that were really valuable that couldn't be taken from you.
Okay, I know you're, the new wave is what you're saying is happening with Bitcoin. Let's go to something ancient. What are your thoughts on gold being an even older part of financial systems going back, centuries, thousand years?
So interesting. In my research, and I don't think anybody else has hit on this. It's what I realized is gold was always the best store of value. And it protected governments against this. But what ended up happening is gold, because you couldn't gain velocity of money, required a credit-based system on top of it to gain velocity of money. And once you had a credit-based system on top of it, you had an incentive for human manipulation. Because if credit contracted at any time, you'd have a recession or depression, and we as people don't like that. So we would vote for leaders who would say, no, we're not going to have a recession. You just keep on printing money. And so at the end, so you also had an incentive for essentially banks to reduce the reserve ratio of gold and increase the amount of credit, because they could make more money by more leverage. So you had an incentive system designed for more leverage all the time. And humans always, if you could control the money to gain at somebody else's expense, human history says you will. And so humans always took that path. And gold always, because of its storage problem, it had to be centralized and it couldn't move around at the speed of an economy. It always got taken, at which point, or repriced, at which point world would go to war to reset an economic system. That and again, if you don't understand, if you haven't done the work on Bitcoin yet, sounds like such a reach, because we're moving into a phased transition to a new system that is designed totally different. But Bitcoin achieves so 21 million cap, but it's divisible by 100 million. So you have literally unlimited kind of velocity, or unlimited units.
Yeah, that's one of your statements, that Bitcoin provides velocity without debt.
But that's exactly it. So now through technology, Bitcoin offers unlimited velocity. I could trade it right now. There's, call it 120 million people growing really fast, people using Bitcoin all over the world. And it can go 40 times in a couple minutes and come back to me without any intervention, without any banking system, for pennies. And so I can trade it. It's a peer-to-peer network, that doesn't require the increasing debt, which always gets manipulated by human control to be able to function.
Okay, so China banned it, and the U.S. I believe I saw an executive order to within 6 months come up with some type of plan for U.S. digital coin. Is the U.S. going to try and kill? You can't kill it, but make it illegal and bring some fear into it, so people don't leave the system of debt and bondage for Bitcoin.
So in what you just asked, you should realize how important it is you get some and put it in a hard wallet, because if you look at what's happening, the lockdowns in China, if you look at what ends up happening on a digital currency, a digital currency is surveillance money. And essentially it's
the end of cash.
It's essentially what a government is saying to you if they want to ban Bitcoin is they're a dictator forever and you better play by the rules and you have no way out. And so they're screaming at you to buy it as fast as you can. And everywhere that's banned it has actually grown faster in adoption afterwards on the peer-to-peer network because it than the ban. Now, yes, they banned Bitcoin mining, but actual people in China are realizing how fast they need it. And so it's, again, really hard to stop. So if the US tried to stop it now, I suspect there's a greater risk of a civil war in the U.S. because than banning Bitcoin. There's no way Texas bans Bitcoin. There's no way Florida bans Bitcoin. And you can see that their economies are flourishing because they're open, free markets, and people are moving there.
Yes,
because of that, and that's what game theory on Bitcoin provides. So if somebody bans it, they actually create a more of an incentive for other nations to accept it, and people will move to those other nations knowing full well that what's coming in essentially, and I almost hate saying this, but it's true. It's true. Communism and capitalism are the same system under printed money. Because we think we have a vote in a democracy, but 70% of the income comes from some revenue from government comes from something we don't vote for. It's a hidden tax. And so what would you think if you had theft built into the base of money? What do you think eventually the economy, what do you think the government structure would look like? And what you're seeing is that's what's happening. And so Bitcoin is a way out, but it's kind of a network, it's a bridge to the other side because the system can't solve the paradox itself.
Okay, so and not to be price sensitive, if you had zero exposure, you wouldn't care if it was 50, 100, or 20,000
or a million,
because it's your freedom.
Yeah, or a million. It's one of those things that I will continue to buy. I've continued to buy at the top. I continue to buy all the time, because it's a safer bet than your cash.
Okay, so we have a little time left. Can you tell us a little bit about very interesting name, Ego Death Capital?
So yeah,
I have no ego.
By the way, I buy that. I buy that. This is a good. So what I realized kind of throughout the book and throughout what's happening in how many people reach out to me and what's happening, I couldn't keep up to the amount of inbound, even with entrepreneurs now wanting to build on top of the Bitcoin ecosystem. And we're at this important inflection point that now you can build on top of it. So you have a base layer and you have essentially a programmable base layer on top of that, or on programmable second layer, like the internet itself. Now, so remember that the internet in 1997, you didn't have video conferencing, you didn't have video, you didn't have, and so in the early 90s, people said, what a useless thing, nobody's going to use this. But they missed what would happen on top of it. And what's happening on top of it is now it's at a point through Lightning, Taro, Liquid, a whole bunch of different technologies that have now come together, that you're actually it's going to look a lot like the internet as a foundation, and the entrepreneurs racing into that is going to look like the early 90s in the Bitcoin, or sorry, in the internet space. So that's and I wanted to spend more of my time in this space where you have kind of hope for the future, truth, something based on truth, hope, and entrepreneurs building a better future. And so we put together Ego Death Capital partly because it allowed me to create a funnel with my partners that I could keep up, so you could vet kind of the best opportunities, and partly so I could invest more into the ecosystem and help kind of create the future that I wanted to see for my kids.
Okay. Jeff Booth and his legacy for his children, and getting the word out to people that if you're interested in your freedom, and especially financial freedom, to investigate it and take a stand and at least have part of your money in Bitcoin. You don't have to pour it all in at once, Jeff. I'm sure it took you a little bit of time to, be convinced to be all in, right?
Yeah, Dale, I think that's actually a really good call. I'm not saying to anybody, hey, do this. I'm
Yeah,
saying
consider it.
investigate it at the root, at the base. Investigate it deep enough that you can understand that most of the attacks against it are not true. They're not but look at it at that level and do your own research. And then if you determine, similarly to I did, that there isn't a better way out, and it's a protection mechanism for you or your family, that if you can remember 12 words, you can go anywhere in the world and nobody can stop you from taking your wealth with you. You might realize it's more important than you might have been led to believe, and it's certainly more important than another investment idea.
You are a great spokesperson for this, and I could tell it comes from deep conviction and skin in the game and a book to boot. Jeff Booth, really a pleasure meeting you. Very interesting discussion. Hope we could do it down the line as we move closer to the end game, and appreciate your giving spirit to share your message with us today, Jeff.
Really enjoyed this, Dale. Thank you.
All right, Jeff Booth, everyone, you could follow him on Twitter at Jeff Booth, and go to Amazon and buy a copy of The Price of Tomorrow before Jeff raises the price on the book. Take it easy, buddy. It
You
was
too.
a blast. All right.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, everyone. Hope you enjoyed Jeff. And, we have very, very tight spreads on Bitcoin at TradeView. And I'll see everyone later. Good hunting. And remember, don't just count your pips, count your blessings. See you guys later. See you, Jeff.
See ya.